You're up, Michelle. For the future for land conservation, very exciting. I'm hoping, my name is Laura Schwach. I'm retired from Future Conservation Foundation, and but I'm on Morris County's Open Space Committee, and I just wanted to have one application this year. One, that's it. And usually it's like 12 or 5. So I'm hoping that this report is that Michelle Byers has put together. I'll introduce her in a second. Will help kickstart and the land conservation movement and energize it and get it back on track. Michelle Byers is retired from New Jersey Conservation Foundation, but serves as a consultant and did this great report she's going to talk to you about. And then Tom Gilbert is co-executive director of New Jersey Conservation Foundation, and Bill take it from Michelle. Thank you. And so we'll have, if you don't mind, we'll have, do you guys care whether we have questions after or during? Let's let them get through their presentation, and we'll should have lots of time for questions. Thanks.
Sure. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here on a beautiful fall day. It's always a great gathering of environmentalists, conservationists around the state. Very, very energizing. And, we are really happy to be a part of this and to share with you kind of a sneak preview of a report that Michelle has been working away at her retirement. And basically, the idea is that we wanted to take stock of where New Jersey is, important work of land conservation. New Jersey, one of the most successful states in the nation, been at this since 1960 and preserved approximately a third of the state's land area. And felt it was an important time to take stock of where we are, how much progress has been made, but more importantly, looking ahead and work that's still to be done, and really to kind of refresh the vision for land preservation in New Jersey in light of the issues of the day, right? And thinking about obviously climate change and its impacts that's already happening in the state in so many ways. In light of long-standing environmental injustices, right? And how we need to be thinking about land preservation as it relates to equity. And so there's no better person that we think of to take that on than Michelle, who has spent her career working to do exactly that, and it's such an incredible legacy. And so we were really fortunate that we could draft her in her retirement, not retirement from NJCF, not retirement from conservation, obviously, to take this on and really dig in and try to bring forward a renewed vision that hopefully people will rally around, and then we can re-energize and focus the work of not just land preservation, but really thinking about making sure that we're pursuing our land preservation goals in a way that are going to ensure that all New Jerseyans have access to quality green spaces in their rural, suburban, and urban, because we all know, I think, in this room, how critical that is to our health, our survival, and our well-being. So that's really the goal behind this report. It will eventually be released to the public, but sharing this with this friendly group of the choir, so to speak. We really want more your feedback and your input before we finalize this and share it broadly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, and then I'll come back up and join for the Q&A.
Thanks, Tom. Well, thanks, everyone. It's really honored to be here and appreciate that you're interested in hearing about what I've been doing for the last year and a half. I've had the luxury of stepping back a little bit from the day-to-day of an organization and really talking to a lot of people. So talked to about 70 people over the last year and a half just to get input and thoughts about what New Jersey's nature and what we should do in the plan. I mean, as Tom said, this is a dry run. This is a preview. This is not the final report. There's still work that's being done. It's taking a lot longer than I ever could have imagined. So talk about imagining. Why reimagine the nature of New Jersey? What does that mean? Well, in my mind, land and nature go hand in hand together. And I think people have been taking for granted that land and nature are just something that's like we don't even notice. But we've learned so much about it in the last 40 years in terms of how it impacts health, how it impacts our economy. And it's a precious and not non-renewable resource. So, you know, it's something that if we don't do anything about it, it will go by the wayside. And it can help solve immediate challenges as today in the form of natural solutions to climate and other things. And our survival depends on it. So that's why I think it's kind of good to take a refreshing look and reimagine what's important about it and what needs to be done. Don't tell me this is not going to work. There we go. Okay, so I put this in here because I think we need inspired leaders. And she's just an incredible Nobel Prize winner. And, you know, we all need to continue that cliche. We need to, you know, work locally and think and globally. And that's why I have her in here as an inspiration. Sorry, I don't know what this number is. There we go. Executive summary, that's what we're going to talk about right now. You know, we sort of view New Jersey at a crossroads right now. There's so many things happening, and you could say that about any point in time. We're at a crossroads. But right now, we've done a lot. We've preserved about 1.6 million acres of land in the state, about a third of the state, like Tom said. But the pace of preservation is slowing down, even though we do have funding. There's not as much activity around preservation as there was, say, back in the 80s, when there were just constantly sprawl development proposals happening. And yet New Jersey is a national leader and can continue to be a national leader. I've spent over $4 billion on it. But the premise here is that there's just no time to rest.
Please pardon me, the air conditioning in here was working.
Oh,
There's no mic.
I think the mic is up here.
I mean, there's another mic.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I had no idea. I just turned the AC on. Got a little sweat. Okay, well, in the meantime, I'll speak up for the best I can. And I want to just paint a quick picture for you. The map on the right is pretty much up to date. It shows all the preserved open space and farmland. And then the breakdown of New Jersey's land area, which I think is really important. It's almost at 5 million acres in the state. 33% is preserved, according to the most recent data that we have. 37% is developed. So we're saying about 30% of the state is left that's not either paved or preserved. And that's a lot of land. And of that, I think it's important to note that about 800,000 of those acres are unregulated, meaning they're developable. And those are our upland forests, our beautiful prime farmland areas that are imminently developable because they're not constrained by wetlands regulations or wetland buffers, stream corridors. And the rest is regulated, and a lot of that wetlands in our stream corridor buffer areas. The one caveat I want to make here is that these numbers are not up to date. It's based on 2015 land use land cover data, and that's all going to be updated to 2020 within the next 6 months or so. So the numbers are going to change. I don't know how much portions are going to change. That's going to be interesting to see. How much more preservation versus development, and how much is going to be still considered remaining land once we get the new data. So I don't want you to focus too much on the numbers, but suffice to say that 30% of New Jersey is pretty much up for grabs. And even the regulated parcels and lands in New Jersey, with the exception of maybe freshwater wetlands, are still very vulnerable through waivers and all other sorts of development proposals that can continue to fill wetlands and build on streams. By region, we broke the state down into these various regions. This will all be in the report, so it's not like crucial information to have right now, but it's important to note that the Pine Barrens and the Highlands are, make up some of the biggest parts of the state. So I'm going to jump right to the meat of this. We said already 33% of the states preserve more or less, depending on the data. What we're saying is that we need to reach 50% preservation minimum for the future sustainability of New Jersey and the long-term health of all of our communities. So we did the conservation blueprint. John Cossey is here from Rowan, the architect of this incredible GIS map-based tool that we use to analyze and rank some of the lands in the conservation blueprint. We rank them all for ecological, water resources, agriculture, and community green spaces. And I won't go into too much of the ranking today because, again, the numbers are all going to change. So it's kind of like bait and switch almost. We don't know what it's going to look like. The second part, and equally important, is that New Jersey needs to establish a statewide comprehensive green and healthy cities initiative, comprehensive planning and major investment for all the state's underserved communities. And it should be led by a task force of people directly impacted in those communities. And this goes to the heart of the equity and the fairness and, a comment that Olivia Glenn likes to make, which is no one can be happy and safe unless everybody is happy and safe. And so, I love where I live. I'm not in the Pacific part. I'm on the Black River, up in the Highlands area. It's gorgeous. But I'm constantly reminded that not everybody has access to that kind of beauty and healthy life. And it's a tragedy in a state like New Jersey that everybody doesn't have that. And that's why this is such a major issue. Funding, I'm just going to run through this very quickly, just to identify some of the various funding pots that we have. We're lucky to have the state corporate business tax, and there is a resolution circulating today at the Congress that I hope everybody signs about maintaining the surcharge on that. One point about stewardship. One of our biggest challenges, which I'll talk a little bit about, is that we don't have sufficient capacity to take care of what we have. And that is always thrown back at the conservationists as a reason why we shouldn't preserve anymore. Haven't we preserved enough? We can't take care of what we have. We should not preserve anymore. And I think that's a really wrong way to look at it. Even if we just bank lands, if we acquire them now and hold them and don't do a lot until we get funding to take care of them, that's much better than letting them get paid over. We won't have the opportunity again. So that's just a quick point there. So the report, as Tom said, it's just supposed to be a comprehensive vision for what New Jersey needs to do to ensure a sustainable future for everybody. And these are all bullet points. I'm sure there's no magic bullets in here. These are things that every New Jerseyan, every resident ought to have in their life. And there's no reason why we can't do it. It's not impossible. New Jersey is a leader, as I mentioned before. It's got to continue to maintain that leadership. So this is just a little bit of a photo. Two choices, two futures. I mean, there's more than two choices, obviously, and more than two futures, but these are sort of on the extremes. So we're talking somewhere around over 1 million acres of remaining lands, 30% of the state. What's going to happen to those lands if we don't take action? So, my premise is that if we maintain the status quo, we inch along at the current pace of preservation right now, we will continue to degrade the environment in New Jersey for water quality, wetlands, flood control, air quality, contamination. those things are gonna continue on if we take no action and just sort of continue on the path that we're on right now. If we do take action and ignore the number, 750,000 acres, that is not gonna go by the wayside completely, when we get the new data. So it's really more of a, it's important more to look at the percentages than the numbers. But making an investment in the health and quality of all of New Jersey cities and towns and preserve, I think, all of the 30% that we can get our hands on. You know, as a career tree hugger, like I'm sure the rest of you, I want to see every last bit that's left in New Jersey preserved. Obviously, that's not realistic. We can get half of what's left. That would be pretty great. Another hero that inspires me, she wrote a great book called Hope, which is all about taking action. If you have hope, but you don't do anything about it, it's meaningless. And she has been just a great inspiration at getting people to take action. So today's threats and challenges, you all know what they are. Climate change. We're a state that's really beset by a lot of threat from sea level rise and flooding, and sinking at the same time. So, you know, our coastline is starting to sink, and at the same time, the sea's going up. So we're extremely vulnerable. All of our water infrastructure in urban communities is extremely vulnerable to climate change and flooding. It's a disproportional impact on underserved communities, which are, for the most part, located along rivers, historically. Environmental injustice. We've had decades of neglect, systemic racism, and underinvestment in our communities in New Jersey. It's had like a really devastating impact on a lot of our cities and towns and our residents. Clean water ought to be a fundamental right for everybody. Loss of biodiversity. There's a, you know, that's been happening for decades. And the loss of biodiversity is, you know, just blame on a whole host of things, including loss of habitat, landscape fragmentation, invasive species, all kinds of chemicals that were, some of which were talked about earlier in Olivia's talk today, so pathogens, and deer. People may not realize the devastating impact the huge overpopulation of white-tailed deer is having. They like to eat the natives, they don't eat the invasives. So they'll eat up all the natives in the forest and then the invasives just take over. And that's what's happening to our forests, and that has a cascading impact on pollinators and birds and all other sorts of wildlife. People in nature. This is a big one. You know, when you think about it, and we talk a little bit about the definition of nature later on in the program, but the definition is pretty much like nature is everything except for human beings. And that's what the Webster's Dictionary says. And our Western civilization pretty much reinforces that. We think of nature and land and all of those things as outside of ourselves. And there's a huge loss of connection that's happened, and it's getting worse with more and more people living in urban communities, more and more people dealing with their technology. COVID showed us that there's hope. In the face of a pandemic, people really went right back to nature, and they congregated in open areas and parks. And that was very much a great way that people reconnected. And nature can provide that sense of community and connection, and also help prevent loneliness and give people an outlet to be together in nature. So that's a really big one, and I think probably underestimate what kind of an impact the lack of nature, lack of connection has. So preserving land, like I said, is key. And everyone needs to have nature with a healthy environment. This is a really interesting project that New Jersey Conservation Foundation has undertaken, and I urge you to take a look at it. It's on the front page of our current website. Jay Watson, he developed this Conservation of Color playbook to try to get young people in urban communities to get engaged in nature. What needs to happen? What incentives are needed what programs are needed, how to get that to happen. And that's just so important for the state. So back to the recommendations. We need to ramp up funding and capacity to increase the scale and pace of land to bring half of New Jersey's land area into permanent preservation. Now that exceeds the Biden administration's 30%, and it's more in line with E.O. Wilson's half Earth theory. I think if I look at it as the most compelling argument to get to 50% is if that 30% right now, you look at what we have, it right now, the 30% that's not preserved is already performing ecosystem functions. It's cleaning our water supply, preventing flooding, it's, cleaning air, it's places, making our environment clean. If that 30% isn't preserved, it's going to get developed eventually. And that means degradation, continued degradation of our water quality, continued exacerbation of flooding. So it's really, what is the cost of inaction? It's huge. It's huge when you look at what could happen to the state if that 30% is not preserved. The preservation priorities that we want to target: biodiversity protection and habitat, linking up really important, huge landscape scale places in New Jersey, iconic, beautiful places in New Jersey, the Pinelands, the Highlands, the Delaware Bay. All of those places are where our biodiversity can thrive. We make the connections and we get big enough landscape to preserve. There's obviously a lot that can be done to enhance biodiversity through land management. This report is really focused more on the acquisition side. Climate change. Our lands need to be put to work. They provide natural solutions for how we can address climate change. And most importantly, our forests, carbon sequestration, water quality, watershed lands, and how we manage farmland is really key as well. The more farmland we can get into sustainable ag practices, the more we're going to have a chance at carbon sequestration and protecting biodiversity as well. We can get off of Roundup and all the neonics and all the other toxins that we're applying to land. It's really important. So the Green Cities Initiative. This has got to come from the ground up. And one of the things that I worked on in this report is to make this part of the report more suggestive and less telling people what to do. So there's a whole list in the report of suggested actions that ought to be considered by the local communities, and it ought to be driven by local communities who know their needs better than anyone else. But it's clear that it's going to need multi-year funding of a vast proportion, and it's clear that using green infrastructure to deal with wastewater and stormwater will help tremendously. These are just a few of the things that it's got to include remediation of all the contaminated sites and making those available for people to get access to waterways and parks, greenway and trail connectors, and probably really importantly, all new development and redevelopment in our cities and towns need to come with strings attached, like green strings. You've got to have parks, you've got to connect up the greenways, you've got to deal with wastewater, green infrastructure, trees, urban forests, urban gardens, urban farms, all have to be part of redevelopment strategies in our urban communities. Shot of the Meadowlands. While I'm on this slide, I should just mention that this report didn't go much into land use planning, but I just want to make a really important point that comprehensive capacity-based land use planning, like we have in the Pinelands and the Highlands, regional planning, and the state plan, if it would get back together a little further, that is a huge, huge lift in supporter of good land acquisition. It makes an enormous difference to have a comprehensive plan that really zones land appropriately for its capacity and at the same time helps determine where land should be preserved. Those two things really do go hand in hand. And the New Jersey Meadowlands does need permanent protection, so that's a big gap in the state. The conservation blueprint, as I mentioned before, it's a geographic information tool that's really easy to use. You can get on it and you can find where you live. You can figure out, where the important wellhead lands are, where wetlands are, etc. It's really a great tool. Here again, just to reemphasize the breakdown of the lands in New Jersey. Lands by region, we talked about that. Land use type. So, this tool can break everything down by land use type, by region. So we've got agriculture, forest, water, wetlands, etc. And the models that were used in the conservation blueprint, you can see here the ecological model. That has an enormous amount of data in it on rare species, resilience data set, and habitat connectivity. So it's extremely comprehensive. Agriculture that focuses on soils, land use, and also proximity to already preserved lands, which, just like land conservation for ecological purposes, is really important in farmland preservation to preserve large chunks of connected lands to ensure the best outcome for farmland preservation. Same with water quality and community green space. This is a very interesting model. I think it's something we want to dig into more. But what we're looking at here is how far do people live to green space and farmland and open space, and what are the highest priorities to try and focus into increase those proximities. The ecological and water resources really do focus on forests and forested wetlands. I can't emphasize enough how important upland forests are in New Jersey. They have no protection whatsoever. They're imminently developable, along with our farmlands. So just a note about Robin. She's an indigenous woman, and she's also a botanist and a writer and a teacher. And if you haven't read her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, I would highly recommend it. One of the things that I learned in the work I've done, and I should have known this, but I didn't, is that our civilization has been occupying the New Jersey region for 400 to 600 years. The Lenni Lenape occupied this area for 10,000 years, and they had a very different relationship to nature than we did. And I think there's some lessons to learn there. There's some learning. There's some ways that we can start to connect with nature by learning more about their culture and the way they related to land.
Would you repeat the name of the book, please?
Braiding Sweetgrass. Every page is like a poem in that book. It's really, it's lovely. So the farmland program has been extremely productive, along with the Green Acres program. I didn't go into a lot of details in this presentation, the history of each program and all of that. I've been here forever. They're just so robust. The farmland program just hit its 250,000 acres this month, which is fantastic. Of course, they want another 200 to 250,000 acres more. So we have lots of work to do there on farmland. I just a note to Outside Together, New Jersey, this incredible work of art that's been done by the Trust for Public Land and the State Green Acres program to get people weighing in on what they want and need in their community with respect to outdoor open spaces. And they just released a draft and they're looking for feedback. So go on the Green Acres website and you can find out how to give them some feedback. It's really important. All right, benefits. We all know about the benefits. I think what's really been interesting is the growing body of evidence on health. It's probably one of the more shocking, not shocking, but maybe revealing benefits of open space. I mean, even to the point, if you're in a hospital and you can look out and see green trees, you have a better chance of a healing outcome than if you're in a room without looking out at the trees. Or even if you're looking at a green wall. I mean, it's that basic, and it's part of our DNA. And I think that the studies are just coming out all the time with more and more reasons why everyone needs nature for their health. You know, if you haven't forest bathed, better get out there and catch up with everyone else. Economic benefits. The Outside Together report just said outdoor recreation alone accounts for 1.5% of New Jersey's GDP, over $20 billion. And these are all stats that have been compiled, you know, year after year by Trust for Public Land and others on the actual economic benefits of preserved land. Population trends. We're going to be close to $10 million, or 10 million people, not $10 million. 10 million people soon, continuing to remain the most densely populated state. And even though it looks like land consumption has slowed and redevelopment seems to be more on the move, you can't ever take those trends for granted. There's also other trends that sort of look to young millennials now looking for single family houses. So that could turn around, you know, and look what the pandemic did too. Just before the pandemic, Dean Hughes at Blaustein was saying, you know, everyone's going to move into the cities and we're going to be vacating the suburbs and our rural areas of the state. Then the pandemic hit and that reversed for a while. So you don't really know. And I think the only secure thing we can do is to preserve 50% of the state. What's New Jersey's nature? Here's the definition. As opposed to human or human creation. I just think that says it all to me. That's how we live. And I think that, you know, the younger generation may be even more, you know, living in that paradigm. And it's a problem. If we don't have people that understand how fundamentally integral nature is to our lives, they're not going to protect it. They're not going to notice that it's gone. And, you know, and I guess everyone will have to move to Mars. So New Jersey is really super unique. It's almost, to me, it's like taking Maine and Florida and squishing them together into one state. It's got such incredible geologic and physiographic diversity, and that's what really makes it so interesting for plants and animals. And I'm going to close up here because there's a lot more information in the report that you'll be getting when it comes out. But I just want you to think about, you know, on the one, there's the Green Acres Preserved Land, you know. Congratulations to Green Acres, by the way, for the incredible work that they've done. I think of all of the state agencies I've worked with over my career, that agency has just been an amazing group of people that have stayed there, stuck together, and made a big impact. And the Farmland Preservation Program as well. These people are just, you know, they're on a mission, you know. Like the nonprofit groups, like all of you, on a mission to preserve land. So the combined preserved open space and preserved farmland just gives you an idea where we are right now. And take a minute to try to, you know, vision what New Jersey would look like if 30% of what's left there gets developed. So my last point here is just to thank all the advisors that I've spoke with. I hope I've been able to capture everyone's comments. It's been quite an effort, and as I said, also this is a draft. What you're seeing is a draft preview. It's not complete yet, and I would love to get your input back on some of the major recommendations. And I'm also available if you want to contact me. There's my Gmail account, my cell phone. I'm totally, you know, welcome any comments, suggestions, criticism, what have you. So now we'll open it up for some questions. Yeah.
So, thank you so much, Michelle. It's just a round of applause. See that very long list of projects that she's spoken with in an interview and tried to really kind of weave their experience in this report. But we really wanted to leave ample time so that we could hear from all of you, have a conversation. This is meant to be thought-provoking and raise some big issues about where are we all going, as a conservation community in the state and what the priority should be. So we really love to hear your reactions, hear your questions, hear your ideas, have a conversation around this.
Yeah, I had a question about something near the end where you talked about a trend for more redevelopment. I was wondering how that's measured because a lot of times in our experience, our redevelopment has not been something that's built on. A lot of times, the area needed redevelopment, it's declared in an upland forest.
Oh, I know, well, that's it.
Right, so like, you separate that out, like when you talk about a trend like that, because if you just look at like what's declared an area of redevelopment, it's not gonna be very accurate as opposed, what's existing buildings that are being redeveloped around versus forested areas.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the redevelopment law allows municipalities and others to designate an area in need of redevelopment. And that gets used in a very, horrible way sometimes to take the forest and say, oh, this area needs to be redeveloped. And that's happening right now. I know down in the Pine Barrens and Pembroke Township. So yeah, that's not the overall issue in terms of moving more towards development. It doesn't include, targeting properties for redevelopment. I think it's measured more, maybe John could speak to that, in terms of the rate of land consumption for development versus, land that's already developed, that's getting repurposed and rebuilt for something else. And that's basically how it gets measured. The New Jersey Future has done some work on that, and that's where the stats came from.
I have one other question. Go to the New Jersey Conservation Footprint map. Say you find a really prime piece of land, that fits a lot of the criteria for preservation, and you go and look at it. Like I could think of a few in Monmouth County right now, right? One in Howell that's the most beautiful piece of land left in Monmouth County, and for the planning board next week, they're ready to take that now. So when you see something like that, what's the best way to start going about trying to get it considered for preservation?
Well, the Environmental Commission, the Open Space Committee in your town would be like the first point, especially given the audience here. I think that makes a lot of sense that those folks have the most knowledge locally about what's going on. But in Monmouth County, there's Monmouth Conservation Foundation, Monmouth County Park Commission. The Green Acres Program does a lot of work in Monmouth County as well. So there's so many different resources, and it would depend on the location. But certainly you could always call New Jersey Conservation Foundation too, because we have those relationships and can find referral.
New Jersey's blessed to have a really strong land conservation community. So whether it's statewide land conservancies or regional conservancies, it's not hard to find an organization that's active in every part of the state. And so it's a good place to start.